Thank you, John and Helen. So we're talking parenting in today's world, which invariably means raising children in their mid-20s all the way down to toddlers, who in demographic terms are referred to as Generation Z and Alpha Generation, respectively. And with me today is Yety Williams, parenting coach and founder of Lagosmums, the first Nigerian blogs dedicated to mums. Yety is also a social entrepreneur with over 20 years experience which spans financial services and real estate consulting. Welcome, Yety.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Thank you so much.
Glad to be here. Looking forward to it.
So, I've heard a lot about Lagosmums. I've heard a lot about everything that you guys do. So it really, really is an honor for me to be able to interview you today. And I will jump right in. My first question would be, why does it seem like Generation Z and Alpha Generation are very different from the older generation?
That's a great question and a good place to start. And I think what it is, children are always going to face different things. And every generation has something unique to them. Generation Z, Alpha Generation, why it seems like they're so different is the fact that they're being raised by parents who have no idea what a digital childhood is. So that's one of the biggest causes of a lot of the tension is generation in, generation out. Generally, parents are able to raise their children off a script. The scripting that they were also raised with. There will be some modifications, but largely that's a common denominator. But now, I use this phrase a lot, and I say we're probably the last set of parents who have one leg in the analog world and one leg in the digital world.
We being people of what age bracket?
So parents today who are raising Gen Z.
Okay.
Who are raising Gen Z and younger. Okay. Because if you look at it, something like Instagram, how old is it? It's about 10 years old.
Yes.
So if you use that as a context, right? A lot of parents today, you were definitely not a child when Instagram was out there. You learnt about it as you got older. Yes. So parents today raising Gen Z and younger are parents who remember probably a little bit of some of your childhood that wasn't digital, wasn't fully digital. But you're raising children who are digital natives. We are the aliens, or depending on where you fall, you're either a digital alien that has no clue about the digital world, or you're a digital migrant, which means you've learnt about a digital world. So you've grown up, or you've started your career, or today you're working, and you can't afford to say you can't email, you don't know how to use a computer. Some things you had to learn when you got older. But for the children, they are born into a digital world from day one, and that's why you give a 2-year-old a device. And you'll be amazed how they operate it. But you're thinking, nobody taught this child how to turn it on. So it's a very different dispensation, and that's one of the biggest things that parents need to realize causes the tension. When you get that big difference, it kind of reduces the tension. It's no more good or bad, either or. It is and. It is how do we figure out raising children in a digital world, and we are constantly learning along with them.
So how do you then balance it? Because digital is not all good.
Right. It's not all good and it's not all bad.
Okay.
And that's why I say that's the basis. It's to just say, okay, what is so different? It's really because it's a digital world. Your children don't know a pre-digital world. So when you say things like, in my days, I used to run outside. I used to make
sand cakes.
They can't relate. Sand cakes. You didn't have anything else to do. You didn't have a YouTube video to watch. You didn't have Fortnite to play. You were doing sand cakes. So for a lot of them, they cannot understand where you're coming from. So when you say, what's the balance? The truth is, I will be the last person to say digital is all bad. I've built my business 100% using digital
digital has a lot of good to it.
Has a lot of benefits. But the question really is the balance. And that's where a modern parent, an intentional parent today, must get that balance right. So that's what we need to delve a lot into. What does it look like? How do you determine when it's too much? What are the things to look out for in your child to identify that the way they're consuming content online is hurting them, or is it harming them?
So how do you then get that balance right?
So that balance right starts from your family digital well-being plan, which I say every family should have. What's your family's digital well-being plan? That means, really quickly, you have children at different ages, between 0 and 10, 10 to 15, 16 and older. How long are they spending online? children below 2 really don't have any business with screen time. And this is based off research and I think it's the American Pediatric Association says that children 2 and younger shouldn't have any screen time. Most parents are like, what? They believe that they need to develop during those years. So they learn better, they learn language, they learn by having somebody communicate with them. But when a child is stuck passively consuming content, they're not learning as many words, they're not learning to read body language, they're not hearing their parents talk to them as much. It's all a computerized system talking to them. So parents think the children are learning, but actually it's very passive consumption.
What of TV? Because that is screen time as well.
It's screen time, not that much. Shouldn't really have TV. Let them play with their hands, toys, play outside, take in nature. They're still learning. Their brains are just developing. So you pluck them in front of a device and they're just like this. They're not learning that much. They're not learning that much. Now, as they get older, of course, you can. So screen time for that age is useful or it's good for them if, for example, it's screen time with somebody that they're talking to. So video communication.
Right.
Where they're talking to grandma or an auntie and uncle who's conversing with them. That is still communication. Right. But it's that passive consumption that's dangerous. Right. And a lot of children, when they get on YouTube, what happens? For example, the next video just comes, and it just comes, and it just comes. So it's very passive. However, a child who's engaging with the content is very different, which is why part of your family digital plan should include mom and dad watching and consuming content online with your children. That's where the communication comes in. Why do you like this? What do you like about this channel? Why is this your favorite YouTuber? A lot of children have favorite YouTubers. Wow. Who is your favorite? Why do you like this content? All right, let me play your video game with you. So the children are living in a digital world, but it's important for us to insert ourselves into that world.
That's where the intentionality comes into it.
It's not about shouting. You're always on this thing. You're always... That doesn't... It's like, I found an example the other day I used for someone and they laughed. I said, imagine you go to a Nigerian birthday party and they don't serve you small chops. You're going to be like, this party is not complete. What's going on? It's the same way for a digital child today. They cannot understand the fuss about not going online. That's their default. So it's for us to help them to understand the balance. So back to balance question. What is too much? Screen time needs to be managed. Okay. Children 24 months and older can get online, but you need to make sure that you have parental software in place. You are making them get off at particular times. If they've been on for, let's say, 30 minutes, let them do something else for 10 or 20 minutes, and they can get back on. A child shouldn't spend 5 to 10 hours on screens all day. There are other things to do. They need to move.
So let me now take this to the Nigerian context, where most parents are working morning till night. A lot of children are being cared for primarily by various caregivers, nannies, grandmas, domestic help. How do these parents who must work, how do they find this balance? Because what you're talking about seems very hands-on.
Okay. So the hands-on nature doesn't only have to be with the parent. It can be with whoever the caregiver is.
But the caregiver may not be literate enough to do these things.
Right. So whose job is that? Whose decision is that? It's the parents. Right? So you have to determine who you're bringing into your house to care for your children. It's really that simple. So if you know you cannot get domestic staff that can do what you want to do, who can raise your children, who are literate enough to follow simple rules and guidelines, because you can't put the rules in place. It's back to that intentionality. You don't want screens to be the babysitter of your child 24/7. It's just not healthy. There are other things to do. So you can put a schedule in place. Yeah, you might be at work, we know that. But we need to be very careful not to use being at work as a crutch or an excuse to not doing a lot of the other things that your children need. Your children are not going to get, when they get older, they're not going to go back and say, well, you can't really redo parenting. You can't redo it. So you have to put those rules in place. If it's grandma has to understand where you're coming from. Why are you seeking balance? Why is there a screen time limit? Right? If it's 2 hours a day or 3 hours a day, what are the other things your child should do when they're not online? There's playing outside, there's reading books.
I hear you, but what about grandma who, like you said, is not even the generation where digital migrants. Yeah, grandma is digital non-existence.
Alien, yes.
And grandma is the one who's helping to raise your child, and grandma's understanding is if your child is naughty, you get spanked. So how do you then get grandma to do that shift?
From what to what?
From the way they know, which is the way they were raised and the way they raised the parents of that child to this way you're recommending, which has digital at the center of it.
Right. So everybody, the same grandparents who didn't grow up with digitals, they are WhatsApp warriors. Right? We can
very
all
true.
agree.
Very true.
Grandma and grandpa, they can send WhatsApp for days. So even they learned that. Right?
True.
They learned how to use WhatsApp and all these smart devices. Right. So it's the same thing. It's back to intentionality. What do you want? So you sit down with grandma and grandpa in a very nice way. If they're the ones caring for your children, listen, we don't want body to be on screen all the time. Why? Well, there's some bad things online. Screen time is actually addictive. If a child is constantly online, they're not learning as well as they could. They need to go outside. They need to play. They need to read books. They need to touch toys. There's a lot that we want our children to do in addition to screen time. And then you start to see, so when we talk about support system, that's part of it. If it's a nanny in the house, I've had fantastic nannies throughout raising the children, but they understood what we were looking for in the house and they had to fit into that schedule. Do you know what I mean? It's the same thing with food. You're not going to have you shouldn't have your nanny give your children Indomie morning, noon and night, or noodles morning, noon and night, right? You shouldn't. So you should have a timetable. 5 servings of vegetables, how are they going to get it in? So it's about being intentional. So digital is just yet another facet of that intentionality. So whoever is raising your child, whoever is involved in raising your child needs to understand where you are coming from.
I see. So, okay. So this Generation Z children and some people in Generation Alpha, they seem to speak a very different language. They behave very differently. They seem to have very different sets of values and beliefs to those of their parents. Why is this?
The children are just responding to society.
How do you mean?
So when you say that they have a set of values that are different, they're responding to what society has brought to them as normal. So
I see.
You know what I mean? So a lot of things, what we call culture, what we call values, what we call belief systems, societal pressure, all of that, it comes from a set of people.
True.
And it's those set of people that evolve. True. So when your child is born and comes home from the hospital, he or she is a blank sheet of paper. They're a sponge to soak in whatever is being served to them. Then you have to look at your environment and say, where are they picking things up from? Which is part of where digital is such a big aspect. Because if your child spends a lot of time on screen time, you're not raising a Nigerian. You're raising a child who knows what's going on in the US, whose mannerisms might be British, right? Whose preference might be lasagna and pizza and not moi moi. So your children are exposed to the whole world. So you have to be, I keep saying you cannot afford to be a permissive parent today because there's so much influence coming consistently that's going to drown out whatever you think your values are as a family if you don't spend the time having real deep quality communication with your children. So they're picking things up from everywhere. So it's not that their values are different, it's that the values of the society are different. And that's what's affecting the children because they're picking it up. If everybody's always dragging on social media, we're always celebrating, you hammer at all costs, it doesn't matter how. If that's what they see, then okay, this must be how we operate. This must be what everybody celebrates, is that you just have the finest, most beautiful, biggest house. It doesn't matter what you really did to get it.
I see. That makes absolute sense. Really does. But here's one of the things that I find so awe-inspiring about Generation Z. They are generally very confident risk takers. They can start a new business every day of the week, and they seem to thrive in those businesses. Whereas my generation, for example, I think my generation is the MTV generation. Okay. We generally are a bit more cautious, and the older the generations get, the more cautious they are.
Right.
They think things through a lot more. But this generation, they want it, they go for it. It's like they have no fear of failure. How did they get to be that way?
A lot of it is honestly the fact that they have examples to look at. Think about it today. If you want to start a business today, if you wanted to start a business in the next hour, we could. Building a website is straightforward for free.
True.
Getting payments, easy. So there's a lot of things now that are faster. And that's the digital age that we're in. Everything is fast, everything is quick, everything is now, which is why even children, depending on where you live, you will order. You expect Amazon to deliver in 24 hours. You know, you order here, they're like 14 days. Why? You know, so everything has changed. Before, you wait for one person that's traveling. You're traveling. Please let me quickly go through Argos and write down the list of things I want. Then wait for the person to go. It's so different.
Or even telephone.
Or telephone. I remember telephone, you had to wait for dial tone. And if you finally got it, you're like, yeah, you now call, then it's engaged. You're like, oh my God. Now it's a touch of a button. So that same speed is part of what's making number one our children and young adults. They're very bold. Failure is feedback. Failure is feedback. They're like, yeah, I'll try it. And if it doesn't work, okay. And they've seen tech companies, they've seen industries come out of nowhere. They've seen people who've started, you know, who've become unicorns from starting one business doing A, B, C, or D. And suddenly they've gotten investments. So the feedback loop now is much faster. And the average young person today doesn't believe that they cannot.
Wow.
They don't really believe they cannot. And especially if they've had the right enabling environment at home that says you can do it. You know what? What's the worst? Like I tell my children, there's nothing like failure. It is feedback. But when you get that feedback, what do you do with it? Because when you junk in, junk out, so you can get data, but how you use it and process it makes all the difference in terms of what you do next.
Wow.
So I think that's how we have a very bold generation. They want to do something now. They can. And they've also seen the old model doesn't work. Right? Not a lot of people now stay in one job that they're working for 20 or 30 years, then they retire, and your pension is enough.
Wow.
They've also seen that model does not work.
Wow. And that is true. And in today's Nigeria, usually that pension doesn't even
go anywhere.
Doesn't help you at all. Wow. Okay. So I now want to take this back to something that's been making the rounds in the news. I don't know if you've heard of, you read the story of the young university lady who killed the CEO of Super TV. And her dad was in denial. Initially, when they came to arrest her, he said, can't be my child. You know, and the people who have actually spoken to the lady's character have said that she's a mild-mannered, quiet, seemingly, you know, harmless human being. But she's admitted to the crime, you know, and she's a Gen Z.
Right.
So the question the parent is probably asking is, where did they go wrong? What could they have done different? How could they have seen those signs with a child who is supposedly harmless? What do you think would have caused this type of thing to happen? Because it could happen to any of us.
You know, that's a question that I don't know that anybody can have one answer. There's several things that went wrong. There's obviously several things that went wrong there. And it's really unfortunate, you know, unfortunate for the person who lost his life, unfortunate for his family and what they're having to deal with, and unfortunate for her as well, because, I mean, I'm sure she has to be looking and thinking, what happened? How did she get here? And so there's a lot of things to unpack there, right? And without knowing the story any closer, I'm very careful to speculate, but something somewhere went wrong. From the minute she met somebody who was older, and she was having a relationship with this person, there was already something there, right? How did that even happen? How did that even happen? And then from there, how did it cascade to this? I've heard all kinds of rumors, you know. I've heard about, you know, substance abuse. So there's a lot of things behind the scenes.
But how did the parents not see any signs? Because when you talk about intentionality in parenting of Gen Zs and Alphas, the assumption is that part of that intentionality is to be able to see the unspoken signs.
Right.
But how is it that the signs, how do you miss that big of a thing?
Right. But not a lot of parents, for example, don't even know how to pick up the signs of drug abuse, though.
I see.
So you can be as intentional as you want. If there's certain things that the child wants to hide from a parent, the child will hide it from the parent.
So how do you then pick up on those signs?
You just, once again, I will be honest, a lot of it is prayer. That's the truth.
Wow.
But a lot of it also is just talking regularly, paying attention as much as you can. But you can't know everything. And let's also be fair to know that this is a very, very, very extreme case. Right? This is very, very extreme. So while it's shocking, it's not something we hear every day. You know, and I keep saying part of why I'm very careful to discuss it, there's a lot behind the scenes that I believe we don't know. I think there's a lot behind the scenes we don't know, and it's very easy to, I think, from another perspective, look and point fingers and say, how could they not have known? They should have known. We really don't know what happened. We really don't know what happened.
Fair
so,
enough.
you know,
Fair enough.
but I do
Fair
think
enough.
the lesson when we hear unfortunate news is for every parent to just look back into their toolkit and say, all right, what do I need to modify? What's working? What's not working? Can I really say I truly know my child? And if you find yourself not being sure, even when you think you're sure, try and figure out a way to do an audit, parenting audit.
Parenting audit, I see what you mean. Yeah. So, okay, so my final question is this. Parenting, sometimes, you know, it's not something you're taught in school, but I personally think that it should be. I believe that it's something that you should teach in school. So if you were responsible for setting the curriculum for this school, what 3 parenting principles would you recommend for raising Gen Z and Gen Alpha?
Right, well, that's a great question. And the first thing would be to understand your parenting style.
Okay.
Understand your child's love language.
Understand your parenting style, 1. Understand your child's love language.
And thirdly, have a parenting vision board, which means that you're not raising a child, you're raising an adult. So if you're raising an adult, you need to, you know, we all know what vision boards are. Yes. A lot of us do vision boards for our life, 6-pack,
yes.
You know,
yes.
30 billion in the account. But a vision board that's parenting specific per child. I'm seeing Body as a 30-year-old gentleman who has this set of values, who's a well-rounded, fill in the blanks for what you want as a parent, then you walk backwards.
I see.
You walk backwards and say, all right, how do we start to build those building blocks?
I see.
To raise an adult. Because we're not raising children, we're raising adults. Your parenting job is done when an adult is submitted to the world.
I see.
That's when your parenting job is done.
I see.
Right? So if you then walk backwards, so I would say those are the 3 tenets, other which I would break it down. And then what connects them all is the fact that we're in a digital age. But our children need the same thing. They need love, they need nurture, they need parents who understand them, they need parents whose parenting style matches what the child needs. You can have 5 children or 2 children and they're each different. The way you parent the first one will not work for the second one. So you cannot just copy and paste. You can't copy and paste. So I think if you sit down intentionally, if that's something you take away from today, and say, how do I delve into those 3 areas specifically, and start to put it together intentionally. You know, there are 3 schools we don't go to, and there are 3 schools that I believe a lot of us need. Marriage school, parenting school, and wealth creation school. Wow. Very few people are taught about true wealth creation. So you stumble into, you get a job, and then you're like, wow, ends never meet. And so it's always a cycle. No matter what you're earning, you're always going to want more. So those would be my 3 main areas that I would
know your parenting style, 1. Know your child's love language. Have a vision board for the adults you're raising, and then work backwards. Awesome. This has been short but very, very insightful. I don't have kids yet, but I've been taking notes because I want to be an intentional parent. So thank you so much for this. Thank you so much, Yety. And we've come to the end of this. And I'm just so thankful. I'm just so thankful. One of the things that I had said to you earlier was when I made an SOS call out for guests for this topic, 5 people recommended you. And that goes to your level of excellence and how impactful you are. So I'm really thankful that I got to interview you today.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday.
You too.
Thank you. After this, Helen, John, and myself will be wrapping up the show. So stay tuned.